Good morning, everybody, and here is Tim Fishback.
Good morning, everybody. Like Arnold said, this is Tim Fishbeck, and welcome to WX Live Webinar number 108, where we're going to receive a little bit of training here from Fabrice Harari, who hails to us from a Caribbean island called Guadeloupe, where it is partly cloudy and 78 degrees this morning. So all of us that are still in the Great White North can be envious of him today. And what Fabrice will be discussing today are WebDev goodies and his new WXShowroom. Many of you may have heard of Fabrice before, but for those of you who have not, he is an internationally renowned developer, consultant, and trainer. It's well known in the WX community. So without any further ado, I present to you Fabrice Harari.
Well, hello everybody. So I agree with basically everything that Tim just said, except for the partially cloudy. It's never cloudy here. Except for that, we're going to talk about WebDev and some advanced stuff on how to use it to make some UI that are really going to be completely different from the regular WebDev UI. And I'm going to use some parts of my own website, fabriceharari.com, and its subdivision WXShowroom that I'm preparing for next week. For those of you who don't know, even though I've tried to announce it everywhere, WXShowroom is going to be basically a tool for all of you. You're going to be able to create an account. It's free, of course. You'll be able to create also cards on each of your products, being a WINDEV, WebDev, mobile, combination of all that. And everybody else in the WX community will be able to find them, see them, link them to you, contact you, and so on and so forth. This is done in order to alleviate several problems that we currently have. One, our customers don't know what WinDev and WebDev and mobile are capable of, so that's a good way of showing them. Also, it's a good way of showing them that you're not alone using these tools. And finally, and perhaps more importantly, it can be a very good way for you to find other product that you can sell directly to your customer without having to reinvent the wheel each time. So I certainly hope that it's going to be a big success, because I've been wanting to do that for a good 10 years now and never had the time, so I decided this time would be the time. So this is what the system is going to do in the end. Now we're going to talk about how it's done in WebDev, and one particular aspect is going to be Ajax. If you want to have a UI that is extremely responsive, extremely alive, you're going to need to use Ajax in order to be able to refresh only parts of your page without having the whole page reload and flicker and all this kind of thing. The problem is you have to think conceptually differently with Ajax, because there are many things going on behind the scene, and to even increase complexity, there are 3 different types of Ajax that you can use in WebDev, and we're
Fabrice.
going to talk about all 3. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but this is Tim. We hear quite a bit of noise from your microphone. It's like it's rubbing up against something.
Okay, let's try. Is it better like this? Hello? 1, 2, 3.
Go ahead and talk.
Okay.
Sounds better, yes.
Okay, well, that's good. This microphone headset are always rubbing against something generally. Okay, so the first type of Ajax, the simplest one, is the automatic Ajax. What I call automatic Ajax is when you simply check the Ajax checkbox either in a control or in a part of code. So it's very simple, and what it does is it allows you to in server code say, okay, this field equal this value, and magically on the browser side you're going to get the field that is populated without the page that is being refreshed. So that's absolutely magic. We're going to have a look at that in one of my pages. Okay, we're going to look at that in this page and in that tab. So how does it work? We're going to look at, as you can see, I have lots of things in my pages. This is the cell that is displayed to manage the product for WXShowroom. And what I'm doing, I'm using Ajax at that level to refresh not this, but the table that is visible here in this table here. So in order to do that, without having to reload the whole thing, I'm using not even the simple system, but a more advanced Ajax system. Let's have a look. Oops, sorry, wrong one. So there are lots of things that are done in there that, of course, you don't need to know. It's just a lot of control and all that. But what I'm doing about Ajax is here. What I'm doing is here, you can see, I'm setting a field. That's the browser code of the button, and the button is Ajax enabled. Okay, and in this, I'm doing okay. Field equal nothing. That field is a special field that is hidden, and that allows you to have a communication process between your browser code and your server code. Then I'm starting a timer, and this timer is in this procedure and is doing this. It is looking if the field is not empty. So how does it work? Well, I'm using this system here with the Ajax enable to say, okay, I'm going to compare everything, check everything, say, okay, everything is good and all. And once it's done, I'm going to put my answer in this specific field. The timer on the browser side is going to check that, and when the answer is there, it is going to process the answer. So in my in my system, I'm preparing a result that is here, as you can see in a string, with everything that I need to know about the problem that I have in my tab and all that. And then when I'm done, I'm going to put that result inside my specific field. So what is happening at that point? Well, the server is doing its magic, calling the page via the Ajax mechanism that is built inside the browser, and putting that value inside my field. And on the browser side, I'm coming in that timer, and about a fifth of a second later, I'm saying, okay, I got the result, stop the timer, and I'm going to extract the information that I have in my formatted string. In that case, I have the first line that is going to be an action that I have to do. So the first line, if it says that I have to close the showroom, then what am I doing? I'm doing the cell close dialog of the showroom. If it says that I have to return to showroom, then I'm doing an info of everything else that is in my string and doing this set focus back to the showroom. Let me show you how it works. So if we are here and we're going inside the account, going in the showroom, so now you start to recognize the page I was on before. I'm going to do a new showroom, putting a title, version, description, doesn't matter, and I'm going to say OK. So what happened here? This is not the server doing an info. This is the browser. In the OK button, I said, OK, there's a problem because clearly the languages are not there and they are mandatory. So I'm just writing this message in my field and my timer saying, OK, I have to go back to the showroom and display that. If now I put here something that is good and say, OK, not good, I have, so let's say WINDEV 18, it's for Windows, and this time I should have everything OK. OK. So now there you have here waiting time. It is because we're in a test mode and I'm sending an email to myself, so it takes a little time for that. But on the real thing on the server, the emails are sent in the asynchronous server mode, so there's no waiting. Okay. Now, what happened at that point? The page was not refreshed entirely. In the server code, I just did the table add in that table. This table is Ajax, so automatically the information appears. But also, I put the result that everything was correct inside my communication field. And I got here saying, OK, close the showroom. If there was a message, and I could put a message, I could say, OK, save was done correctly, remember to do this or that, and I will also have that displayed. And I'm just closing the dialog and have it go back to the page that is below it. So at that point, I used both the automatic Ajax system of the table, because I just put the value in it and it appeared in it, so that was easy. But I also use the automatic system to put data in a communication field, check the communication field on the browser side, and automatically on the browser side do this or that depending on the cases. And that's one of the problems that you have when you start using a cell in a page and you try to use Ajax, and suddenly you cannot close it because the closing has to be done in browser code, but your server is going to refresh the page. So that's the whole problem that you have when you want to have a UI that is really extremely responsive and very, very easy for the user. So that's the first case. The first case where you already push the way Ajax is working in order to have a UI that is more interesting. Now, there is also something that you have to understand about that. As soon as you use Ajax in any mode, the page still has to communicate with the server, or the server with the page, because the server is pushing information to the page. And unfortunately, each time there's a communication between the server and the browser on the Ajax level, the page init code is redone. And that can lead to a lot of funny things when you are doing code inside your initialization of the page. And that code is going to be redone and redone and redone. So to avoid that, there is a trick. So that is not in the documentation. Here is what I'm talking about. Look at that. Page parameter is a function that allows you to get the value of any parameter of the page. Well, the parameter WD action is used when a call is made in Ajax. The server is calling your browser again, sending information saying, okay, new parameter with WD action, do this, do that field, and so on and so forth. And that parameter is not visible in the URL or in your address bar. But it's still coming in, which means that if you do a page parameter of WD action and store it somewhere, you can, here in your code, saying, okay, if this WD action is something, then you can directly avoid some code. Now, what I did here is a little more complex. I have here just have that to show you how it's done. But I have, in fact, a function that is testing several parameters because there are several of them, not only WD action, but also some of them. And I have a function that is just returning false or true, depending if we are in Ajax mode or not. But that's the way it's done. At that point, you're doing, okay, if it's not in Ajax, then do this. If it's in Ajax, you don't do it again. I'm doing that in that case to manage my session and authentication of user and all that. And clearly, it's not something that you want to do and recreate a new session each time there's an Ajax communication. So that's something that I'm doing only once. Okay, so that is just
Fabrice?
Yes?
Are we looking at an AWP or a WebDev Dynamics site?
This is an AWP site.
Okay, all right. I suspected as much. Just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Well, it is an AWP site, and in fact, as soon as you want to have an internet site, you need basically to go in AWP, otherwise search engine won't be able to go anywhere inside it. So if you're doing intranet or extranet, classic mode is okay. But as soon as you want to do a website that needs to work with search engine and be accessible from everywhere, it's going to be AWP. So I'm basically, these days I'm coding 99% of the time in AWP mode. So that was the first of the three different type of Ajax that you can use. That's the automatic mode. I used only the built-in Ajax, checked the server code as Ajax, the table as Ajax, and that was it. Now, I'm also using other things, and even in the same page, I'm doing something else. By example, I do not want to wait till the user validate here on by OK to let him know if the login he's using is already used by somebody else or not. So I'm using here the Ajax Execute, that's the synchronous mode, to call a server procedure and check if the login is already used. If it's used, then I'm displaying a message immediately when you exit the login field. That process is blocking, which means that the user will feel that he cannot enter anything while the server is answering. So if your server is too slow or if the process that you're doing is long, you're going to have the user that is going to wonder what is going on and why everything is locked. Here it's acceptable because it's a check that is extremely fast, and you basically just have a little hiccup, but you have the answer immediately after that. So in that case, it's okay. Ajax Execute allows you to just call a server procedure where basically, as you can see, I'm just seeking in the file and result found or not. That's all. So that's all there is to it. You do a call directly here, and you get the result directly here. It's extremely simple. but it's the first of the non-automatic Ajax mode that you can use in browser code to do something on the server and react on what is going on the browser side. It's extremely helpful, but once again, it blocks the user during the time of the execution. So the third mode is the asynchronous Ajax mode, and that's a little more complex to implement. Not to understand the way it works is also quite simple. Instead of doing an Ajax Execute asynchronous, you're doing an Ajax Execute asynchronous. And in that case, you're giving it the name of the server procedure that has to be executed. And you're also giving it the name of the browser procedure that has to be called in order to process the result of the call when it arrives. So it's basically a callback system that you will have available in the browser side. So why is it interesting? Well, let me show you how I'm using it. It will be easier to understand. Okay. Here, and I'm going to show you. This is a prototype. I'm working on it of WXShowroom, the UI that will allow you to check what's what in the WX world of products. As you can see, I don't know if you were able to see the animation in the transmission that you got from the other side. But as you can see, the UI that I created at that point is a responsive UI. It is going to adapt to what you have available as room on your browser. So now I'm going to increase the size of the browser. This part of the website, as my internal website, is not adaptive to the size of the browser, but the showroom is. And now we have more room to display more cards at the same time. So in order to do that, you have to know which size the browser is. There's no way around it. In order to be able to know how many cards you can display and where, you have to calculate everything based on the browser side. But you do not have this information on the server side. You don't know which side the browser is going to be on each user machine. So if you want to do something like that, it has to be a browser-driven UI. The code that is doing all that has to be on the browser side. At that point, I'm going to redo it so that you can see how it works, different steps. The UI is first displaying empty, empty, and then the data is coming in. Of course, you don't need to do all the animation of the fields and all that if you don't want to. That's just a display of what is possible quite easily with WebDev in order to put to rest the idea that WebDev cannot do any advanced websites. What's interesting, and I don't know if you can see it with the animation, is that the data is displayed afterwards. You have the cards appearing, putting their place, and during that time, you have the data coming in, and you see here you have 4 cards on the 4 that I have in my file, and I'm going to do it once again. As you can see, the moving of the cards and the display of data is completely independent. It's happening between, during, it depends on the response time of the server. So, in order to do that, clearly, first, you need to know how many cards you're going to be able to display, and that is something that you will know only on the browser side. At that point, you can decide, okay, I can display that many cards, so I can put them in place on my screen, and you've seen the animation doing just that. And at that point, you can say, okay, I need that many records from the database, and I don't need to read 5,000 records if I can display only 4 or 5 cards. So everything at that point is done from the browser. Let's see how it's done. So this is the page, and the page is working this way. We're going to step through the different processes. So the page is initialized on the server side, and I'm declaring quite a few variables because these variables are going to be used on the browser side to do all the calculation and all that. That you don't care, it's just my session management. But here is what we are working on. So this is done from the browser side. As you can see, we are in the onload code of the page. So when the page is loading, we need also to calculate everything and load the data. However, there is one problem. At the time when this code is starting, the browser doesn't have everything in place yet. It is still doing the resizing of the different cells, the positioning of all that. All this automatic zoning system that WebDev is going for you is not finished. It's done at the same time, which means that if at this point you immediately try to get the size of the browser, the size of the cell, and calculate everything, sometimes it's going to work, and sometimes you're going to get a value that is not the current value, but the design value instead. This is why here I'm doing a timer of 1 second, so I have a 1 second wait, and then I'm going the initialization of the page. So what will happen is that the page will display quite fast but empty, so that's good for the user. There will be a 1 second delay, and then we're going to do everything else to display information. So the first part is of course to end the timer, because you don't want to redo your presentation all the time. Calculate the card position, so there's nothing in that except calculation. Get the size, divide, add, all that. It's nothing fancy here. And then we are going to ask the server to send us the data. Now that we know how many we need to have. So what I'm doing here, I'm doing a first call to the server using Ajax Execute asynchronous. Ajax Execute asynchronous is going to ask the server, so that's the server procedure, to send back to this browser procedure a list of IDs. I'm just getting the IDs of the card to display in order to minimize the first transfer of data. The S selection parameter is done for the future because there will be a search possible with different way to filter the data. So that will be where the filter is sent, but currently it's empty, not used. So what's happening here? Well, there is a result, but it's not the result of that procedure. It's just an identifier for this call to the server. Okay, I'm getting the first call, second call, and so on. On the server, I'm just doing a query, preparing the result in a string here, and sending the result back to the browser. But I'm not sending it back to the calling code, and that's where it's a little more complex. I'm sending it back to that procedure. What that means is that I'm not blocked here. I'm just sending a request to the server, and once the server has sent the answer, this code here will be activated. During that time, I am continuing to do everything else in the browser, and in that case, I'm animating all my cards in order to have something moving while the user is waiting for data. So if we look at what is happening here, we are getting the list of cards, And here we are starting to animate the whole thing. Okay. So the animation itself is very simple. Now in 18 you have an animation play on control property, a function to do that for you. Before that you had to do it in a timer, in a loop, in JavaScript. It was a little more complex, but now it became really easy. But as you can see, I'm just doing that. Ask the server for the list of cards, and all that is about putting the different cards in place visually but empty. Now, what is happening next at some point, and that point can be in the middle of the animation or it can be once the animation is finished. Doesn't matter, because this will happen when I receive the data. So what am I doing here? Well, first, I'm doing a little trick here. I'm testing if the Ajax identifier that we are talking about in the call of Ajax Execute asynchronous is the last one. This allows me to send several requests to the server, one after the other, but to process only the last one when it arrives, and to ignore completely request 1, request 2, request 3, because I know I put it inside this global variable. I know that I made a request for the same thing. So I know that the answer 1, answer 2, and answer 3 are already stale. This will allow me to have a search function on the browser side, where the user will be able to click on the Go button, change a setting, click on the Go button, change a setting, click on the Go button, and only the last one will be displayed because at that point we'll start to receive the first and the second one, but we'll know that these queries are not up to date anymore. So that is something that is extremely interesting because it allows you to avoid processing data and have 3 different displays when you need, in fact, only to display the last one. Now, what do we do at that point? Extract the information that is in the string. That's just string management, so there's nothing to it. Then here I'm just going to set a few information in variable, and in particular in that case I'm getting the number of answers to my query. Currently I have very few cards in my file, but I hope that very soon you will all create a lot of cards in my showroom, and at that point you will all also filter from the WXShowroom page in order to have only a limited number of answers, because you're interested only in WebDev sites or only in apps or only in this or that. So if I have only 7 answers or 23 answers or so on and so forth, I may not want to display all the cards on the page because I won't have data to fill them. So here I'm just setting values in my pointers in order to know how many cells I need to display and so on. As you can see, I still have some traces here so that I can show you how the whole thing works. Now, when we're doing that, when we're receiving data, we have to restart the display starting at the card number 1, so that is doing. And then we have to ask the server for the data for 1 card, the first one in that case. As you can see, we said that the current index and card are 1, so get 1 card is going to do just that. And once again, we are going to do an Ajax Execute asynchronous. So there's a second call to an asynchronous system that is going to get 1 card of the server and ask it to be processed in Ajax receives 1 card. And I'm passing here the ID of the record to return. So in the server side, I'm just doing a H36 of the whole thing, and in that thing, remember that there will be not only the description, but in the future there will be also print screens of the application and all that. So this can be quite heavy. So it's much better to do it little by little when you need it than to get 5,000 record and bog down your system. So I'm formatting the result and sending it. Again, this is extremely simple. Now, what is happening in the browser side? So at some point, the browser is going to receive a result to this call. And this is just going to be processed here. What are we going to do? Extract the information from the string. Now we're going to set the content of one card. So that's just a function that does just that. Now that code is ugly, and that's because there are no indirection available in browser code. So you have to do it the old-fashioned way by testing which card you have to fill. So that's a little painful, but once it's done, it doesn't move, so it's okay. So we're just setting the value in the card, and then checking: do we have other cards to display? Yes. Then, sorry, that's the no part. Here we are removing all the empty cards, and otherwise we are just asking for another one. And when it arrives, only when it arrives, we'll do this process again. And during this time, the whole UI will continue to move. The whole UI will continue to be available for the user. So let's look again, now that you know how it works, let's look again at the result. To do that, so we had first 1 second wait. Then the cards visibly came up and started to fill during that time. At the same time here, I had the count turning in order to show you what is going on. So I don't know if the animation is fast enough for you to see the details or not, but you can see 1 on 4, 2 on 4, 3 on 4, 4 on 4. At the same time, then the animation was being done. So the data processing is done completely separately from the display, and because of that, you have your UI that is filling when you need it. And you can do whatever you want. You can do a scrolling, and as soon as you have new data, you scroll a little more, and you scroll a little more, and so on. You can have a UI that is extremely adaptive, extremely responsive, and fully modern with WebDev, no problem. Now let me show you one last thing at that level. That's the result of the trace that we had here, just to show you the process. So I started the trace in the Ajax browser procedure that is receiving the whole list of cards, and I got 4 cards, and on that screen I could display a maximum of 8. That's the information I have here. Then I have here the Ajax receives 1 card. Later, I received the answer for my Ajax call for this here, this card. Ask for another one, receive 1 card for this one, 1 card for this one, and 1 card for this one. And that's it. And that really happened exactly when the data arrives. I don't care when it is. My UI during that time is being modified, is being transformed, really, and I can do that on any size of browser. As you can see, it's not a problem, and I can do that on a smaller browser too. Even though my title is not completely visible, my cards are processed correctly. So currently what this thing is not doing is, if I resize the browser when it's already displayed, then nothing is happening. And in the future, it's going also to reposition everything on the fly when it is when the browser is being resized. So that is about it about Ajax. It is really important if you want to do a website that is really in the modern way of doing things. You have to do it with this kind of techniques where you're going to have your
Hi, Fabrice. Let's see. If you have a question, either type it on the chat box or open up your mic. Pete, you got any questions? Brian, anybody? It's pretty cool
No,
stuff.
the only thing I would say is I suspect that firing of the page init that you were talking about, Fabrice, must be a side effect of AWP, or it's something that no longer happens. I just tested that in 18 on a dynamic site because I'd never experienced that on a dynamic site, and it definitely doesn't. You said that the page init code fires every time you make an Ajax call. Okay, yeah, that's what I was saying. I suspected that was because of AWP. WebDev Dynamic, that does not happen. Right, understood, but yeah, right. Yeah, just wanted to make sure that was clear, that that page init does not fire on a Ajax call on a WebDev Dynamic side.
I don't know. Any questions, anybody? It's really cool stuff, though. I like your little what do you call those? Um, Trello's type. Um, yeah, cards. Yeah. Yeah, I guess they call it cards too. They call it cards too. Now, in the beginning, I noticed that when it comes up, we see the whole screen fill with blank cards first, right? Or is that the animation? Uh-huh. You know what? It's probably coming over the conference. Um, uh-huh. Uh, yeah, that's kind of pretty cool effect anyway. Mhm. Okay. Cool. And so when you have next page, and so say you had 50, you would show just what you need to fill this screen, right? And when you hit next, okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll get more of people coming on so they can see you do this live rather than on a recording and ask questions. Cool. And you're welcome back any other time to keep the progress going and share your journey. All right. So No more questions. We'll let everybody go back to bed or get to work or have a cocktail.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Fabrice. That was very informative. And I'd like to make just a little teaser announcement, if I could, right before we wrap up. We are going to have another DevCon this year. It is going to be the week of October 26th in Atlanta, Georgia. More details are forthcoming, and pricing is forthcoming as well. But we're going to do our very best to keep the pricing as close as last year as possible. And your presenters this year will be Fabrice and Pete, Andy, and Glenn, just like last year. Thanks a lot.
Cool. All right. Thank you, everybody, and have a great weekend, and take care. See you next week. Stopping the recording now.